everything by definition has a deep signature of light inside it. Now, further, if we consider any small iota of space, then within that, there are millions of photons, and these photons continually carry information from the world around us into our eyes and recreate in our brains an image of the world. So in other words, what happens is that this action of photons is grounding us deeply in a massive light-based operating system. Now further, if we think about any living being, then we can trace back nutrition to a simple process of photosynthesis, which itself is based on light from the sun. So it's fair to say that without light, we wouldn't exist. If we consider the current infrastructure of our world, then many of the key technologies that constitute this infrastructure are in fact dependent on different wavelengths of the electromagnetic spectrum, which itself is nothing other than light. So whether we consider radio waves, microwaves, infrared, visible light, ultraviolet, X-rays, gamma rays, these all are central to technologies that we've come to rely on very integrally in current day life. And so without that, our current life also wouldn't be what it is. When we extrapolate into the future, then it's been said that a lot of the future is going to depend on optics and quanta. But these themselves are derivative from light. So the past, the current, the future all have a high dependency on light. And yet we barely consider light. We barely are in conscious relationship with it. We don't understand it deeply enough. So the question is, if we changed our relationship with light and if we deepened our understanding of it, then how would life be different? How will our world be different? And that essentially is what these cosmology of light workshops is. Now, in this workshop specifically, I'm going to propose that space-time, energy, gravity are also emergent from light, and an understanding of them will deepen our relationship with light. So it will give us insight into how light operates and how we can make change happen by leveraging these things that we've come to know as space-time, energy, and gravity. So, having said that, a quick, brief overview of where we're going to go is I want us all to just spend a few minutes to introduce ourselves. Then we're going to review the concepts from the first workshop. And then we're going to use that as basically the foundation to get into space-time, energy, and gravity in a cosmology of light point of view. We'll take a brief break after that, and then we're going to come back to some exercises where we'll be integrating the use of space-time, energy, and gravity in some kind of visualizations. And then we'll wrap it up with some reflections and sharing. That sound okay?
Yeah, I like it.
All right, awesome. Okay, so with that, sorry, Anastasia?
Oh yeah, I just had a question. Maybe you could answer it later, but when you, excuse me, when you said that the future is going to be largely related to optics and quanta, I had a question just arise around what that means. So maybe whenever you feel, or if that's something for another time, but it sparked something in me to be curious.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And it's a point of view. So there's an extrapolation, or basically many scientists will say that quanta and optics is going to be central to how the world will evolve and what's going to emerge in the future because of quantum computing, or because of essentially the high advantages of, for example, like optical storage or using optics to as a basis of new and different technologies. So these are the things that from a scientific point of view are considered to be central and kind of redefining, what our world might be. And so, when I was speaking about the past, the current, and future, all three of those were just from a scientific perspective. But I think that, light in itself is something much greater than what science can even see. So that's something that we always have to keep in mind when we're going through this workshop.
Thank you. So I'm hearing you're talking about the way that technology will be implemented based on those two structures. It was interesting when you said it. It's almost like, I don't have the language necessarily, but it's like as there's evolution, that there would be an evolution in the way that even light expressed. So, right. And that was more what I was tuning into rather than the technological, but that's a reflective aspect of the underlying current of the evolution of the universe in its expression through light. And so there was something there that spoke on a deep level.
Yes. Thank you for pointing that out. Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, great. So, with that, if we can just introduce ourselves and name a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what your interest in light is, and what you hope to get out of this workshop. Dylan, would you like to go?
There you go. Yeah, I'd love to. My name is Dylan Jorgensen. I'm living in Las Vegas and Park City right now. I work with Pravir, so I build some like network tools. I'm really interested in like emergent properties, how information travels through networks, how decisions are made as a group. I'm really interested in kind of understanding deeper levels of like why the world works the way it does. And that's kind of what led to my interest in light, is because there's always every time I read something about like what's inside inside of us, and you hear cells, and then inside of cells there's sort of DNA, and then you're kind of like, well, what makes up something? And you get to like chemistry, and then you get to like kind of quarks and gluons, but it always gets a little fuzzy. And I like how Pravir has decided to at least attempt to try to give us like the bottom level, like something that we can try to build on and see if the science works. And I think he's done a great job with that. So I don't know, I just fundamentally want to know why the world is the way it is, and who I am, and why I exist, and why some things seem like they're in the past and some are in the future, and some, like some things, and it just feels like light is kind of a North Star that I'm trying to follow right now, looking for that answer.
Thank you so much, Dylan.
Okay, I can go next.
Cool.
So my name is Kannan, and I think the name Sriniket is there because my younger son uses Zoom more than me, and so he's probably put his name there. So, so I am from India, Bangalore, and I work with. I've basically been working in the consulting space, technology as well as process, centered around supply chains most of my career. But really my area of work has nothing really to do with this. On the personal side, I'm into meditation. Have been doing that for decades now. I got in touch with Pravir's works many years back as part of my connection with Sri Aurobindo and Mother and others. And then so one thing led to another, and I think this the recent fascination. I mean, the recent works that Pravir has done around light, I've been kind of catching on them. Obviously, many of them are a big leap for me, right, from where I am. But one thing which specifically got me interested in this was in the last workshop, we did an exercise around light. And Pravir, I chanced to read one of your blogs as well on Medium. where you
Uh-huh.
describe a couple of experiences that you had when you were a kid. And one of the things so basically, I don't know, I mean, a couple of these things, I started kind of visualizing light and so on after the last workshop. And maybe I'm sensitive to this or whatever, but you kind of quickly see certain things happening. So I don't want to get too much into detail, but there is a certain stillness which happens, I don't know, whenever I contemplate light.
Yeah. Okay.
And that leads to a few other things that I can kind of feel in my body, basically. Right? So there is something there. It's a mystery, but it's not like there is nothing there. There is something there. I would definitely like to explore more. Hopefully, not just intellectually, but experientially, and that's really what I'm looking forward to.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Kannan. So yes, definitely the way that this workshop is structured is that the first half will be more intellectual to introduce us to the notion of space-time energy and gravity in the framework of light. And then the second half will be more experiential.
Yes. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah. Anastasia?
Hello, I'm Anastasia. I'm in the Santa Cruz Mountains in California, at the top of the Redwood Forest. And yeah, it's so beautiful to hear your shares. And I was just feeling too, I think Pravir, you're in California, right?
Yeah, I'm in the Bay Area, actually in the East Bay, Berkeley.
Okay, so we're not that far from each other. And then Dylan, you're over in Utah right now, you said?
Yeah, Park City, Utah, but I usually live in Las Vegas.
Yeah, Utah's been on my grid as like a really, like one of the main, actually in like all of North America, like one of the most powerful ley lines.
Oh.
Centers in the Americas. And then you're over in India, and just like so many of my practices, and especially during this time, the guides coming in from those lineages. And I've been very blessed to be, in guidance under lineages where the masters have come from over there. And I was just feeling even that grid of all of us and feeling really grateful to be here with you. So I want to say that first. So thank you. It's such an honor to be here with you all. And just feeling how much everyone's bringing to this circle. And I do a handful of things. I met Pravir because I work with a light technology that comes from Austria. It's a hypnagogic light therapy that entrains the brain to theta, among many other things. Although since COVID, I have stopped doing that and am really stepping into a deeper understanding of what I am and why I'm here, which is as a channel. And so I've shifted to doing sessions where I'm doing a combination of just guidance, information, and quantum work. So I did some study and working with teachers and everything from high magic to quantum healing sessions, and that's more what I've shifted into. And that's like temporary, like we were talking about when I came on the dying. It'll take infinite forms, but ultimately, at this point, my work is to be as clear as I can align to be a direct channel for the support of what's happening on our planet. And nothing feels more resonant or true to my heart than the essence of the light and the space in which the light resides, that primordial mystery as well. And so with these sessions and lectures, there's something where I'm getting to reside in a channel of infinite wisdom that communicates to my heart so deeply. And I've told Pravir before, like, oh my gosh, I wish I could be in your brain. You speak such an amazing language. The understanding of the universe in this way, I'm much more of like a felt sense or receiving information. And so to be able to step into a space of so much wisdom and connection to this energy that then creates the perceived reality that we are residing in, I just love to be here and to open to the experiences very similarly as you share it all. And very grateful to be here and excited to see what comes.
Thank you so much, Anastasia.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really nice to have you all three here. So hopefully we can go as deep as we want and then spend enough time on the experiential side as well. So, with that, I'm not going to spend time on this, but this is for people, usually if somebody doesn't know, but I've been deeply interested in light, and it's been triggered by some natural experiences that I've had through the years. They started off when I was a child, and I never related them to light. I just took it for granted, and I thought everybody had those experiences, so I never talked about them. And it was just years later when I began to get introduced to different frames of thought that it struck me that what I had experienced was part of that frame of thought, and that it's not so frequent that people may have that, but that kind of understanding only came, decades later. But I just took it for granted. But the result is, because it was deeply embedded in me, my perception is I think a little different as a result, and so I wanted to articulate that in the series of books that I've been writing. And so there's been 3 complete series, one on fractals, and then the other 2 on different aspects of cosmology of light. So, objectives, just to go over what we want to focus on, is first a review of what we went through in the initial workshop, which is some basic cosmology of light concepts. Then we want to specifically delve into the place of space-time, energy, and gravity in a cosmology of light. And then, more importantly, we want to apply the light-based tools and techniques to a range of situations. So, in addition to the visualizations we had gone through before, we'll be deepening those visualizations to include space-time, energy, and gravity. And then finally, hopefully we can connect more deeply with light through this understanding of space-time, energy, and gravity that emerged from it. So I hope that we can experience that conceptually and perhaps even experientially. So, with that, we're going to review the concepts, and this is going to be really quick. And let me just pose a question to you based on now your kind of enhancing understanding of light, or kind of changing understanding of light. When asked the question, what's light made up of, what comes to your mind? What's light made up of?
To get it's light and empty and massless, so not much comes to mind, but I kind of think, sometimes I think about how a photon, if it travels from a light bulb to my eye, it's going at the speed of light, which means that it doesn't sense space at all. So I kind of think sometimes light is more like time, kind of maybe it's more future, past, and present, sort of playing out in not the same order I would expect or something, but I don't know. That's kind of the way I think about it.
Thank you. Other thoughts before we go forward?
I don't know, some energy waves. I mean, it's difficult to describe, basically.
Yeah, energy waves, and you were also suggesting earlier that somehow there's something that you experience or see in your body as well sometimes.
Exactly. So that's why I kind of hit a barrier when I contemplate light.
Okay. All right. Anastasia, would you like to say anything, or should I move forward?
I'm a little bit biased, I think, by having taken this before, but in this moment, what came was, it's the expression or experience, right? If we're on one end of it, of infinite potential from the universe. So it's an expressed and experienced, perceived aspect of potentiality is what I'm getting in this moment.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, and then just very simply, the main point of this is that whatever our perception or conception of light is, and when we go out on a slightly drizzly day and see display of a rainbow apparently caused from this colorless, contentless light, that can be both kind of like soul stirring, or it can just put us face to face with a mystery that we often don't perceive or consider. But the fact that light that appears to be colorless and contentless has in fact a lot of different content to it. And certainly there's variation in color, but the question is, what else is light made up of? And so at the heart, and this is just a quick overview of where we've gone, so I'm going to rapidly go through this. But then I'm also going to ask you for a recap at a couple of points. So heart of cosmology of light is essentially that light conceivably travels at different speeds. And so my proposition is that the native state of light's natural state is where it travels infinitely fast. And when it travels infinitely fast, then if we consider any large volume, whether the solar system or a galaxy or the universe, and imagine light at the center, then since it's infinitely fast, it's going to be present everywhere in that volume instantaneously. So there's something that we recognize as presence that's created due to the action of light. If anything other than light occurs in that vast volume, then it will be overpowered by light. And so light has something that we can relate to, which we may call power. Now, this fabric of light that spreads itself through any large volume can record any appearance or disappearance of something that's happening in its fabric. And so it has some kind of knowledge of what's going on everywhere in its space. And so there's this, it brings us face to face with this thing that we may recognize as knowledge. And then since everything is connected in the fabric of light, there's essentially a fundamental harmony that exists because it's all happening in the nature of light. And so what I'll propose is that light in its native state, which travels infinitely fast, has these properties that we can somehow understand as being this presence, this vast power, this incredible knowledge, and this great harmony. So there's these four things, these four aspects that appear to be in the native state of light. When light is projected, now since light in this infinite state or native state has all potential in it, it can project itself at slower speeds. And so when it projects itself at 186,000 miles per second, which is our constant speed in this physical universe, there's a particular kind of reality that emerges as a result. So if we think about this reality, and here's a depiction of it, and this is the sun on the horizon, and we are on planet Earth. And we know it takes about 8.5 minutes for that light from the sun to get to the Earth. So if we do a little thought exercise and imagine ourselves on a ray of light somewhere in this journey, when we look at the sun, we'll realize that we were there a few minutes ago. When we look at the Earth, we realize that we are going to be there a few minutes in the future. And so the notion of past, present, future is arising only because of the way light is traveling. If light were traveling infinitely fast, then all time would be happening now. But because light is traveling slower, there's this perception that there's a past, present, and future. But in addition to that, also what the slower velocity of light allows is a buildup of energy or information that creates packets. That's the basis of all matter. So I want to propose that when light travels slower, and specifically at this constant speed of 186,000 miles per second, it creates four fundamental aspects of our reality, which are past, present, future, and matter. But further, there's a one-to-one mapping between the four properties that we imagine exist when light travels infinitely fast, and the four properties that emerge when light travels at 186,000 miles per second. So if we take this first mapping, then I want to say that if we think about the past, and if you look around the room that you're in, you'll see that all the doors, windows, objects, desks, everything is a result of a tremendous activity that's occurred in the past. So you're looking into the past as you look around your room. And in that massive activity, there's been this presence that's allowed this activity to occur. And so past is really a glimpse into this notion of a vast presence. When we think about the present moment, if we look into ourselves right here, right now, any one of us, we may perceive that there are different kinds of thoughts, different emotions, different perceptions, different assumptions that are coursing through our being. And yet it's the most energetic or powerful thing that will express itself and determine our experience of this current moment. And so I want to propose that there's a one-to-one mapping between this power and the present moment. Now, when we think about the future, then usually we have the benefit of experience. We have some kind of guiding concept or ideas that want to fulfill themselves. And so we get a glimpse into this thing called knowledge that really dictates what the future is. And then when we think about matter, any way that we look at it at any scale or any level of granularity or any kind of level of complexity, matter always occurs in relationship to other matter. And so there's this inherent harmony that exists. And so matter is giving us a glimpse into this thing that we call harmony. So I want to propose that if you all have a mathematical bent of mind, then you'll see that this is something called symmetry. So from different points of view, we're actually seeing the same thing. So these four properties that are presence, power, knowledge, and harmony that exist when light travels infinitely fast, when we slow light down, it's the same four properties that maintain the symmetry, but they show up differently. So it's exactly the same thing. So this, in fact, presence, power, knowledge, harmony will exist in different aspects of themselves, no matter how fast or how slow light is traveling. And that's the basis of a cosmology of light. So you've got these four properties that structure existence, no matter how fast or slow light is traveling. And it's the same four things that just show up differently based on how slow or fast light is traveling.
Can I ask a question, Praveen?
Yes, please.
So, how does light figure out the switch, right? Or who figures out the switch from infinite to 186,000?
Sorry, who figures out the switch for what?
The switch from infinite to 186,000 miles per second.
Yeah.
Miles per hour. Sorry.
Yeah. So
when you say we, you mentioned when we reduce the speed from x to y, but then is light conscious?
So I would say my short answer is yes. Because there's different ways to perceive of it, but yes. So light in its infinite potential, in its native state where it's traveling infinitely fast, has all potentiality, all information, all possibility inherent inside it. And so consciousness is part of that as well. We are just trying to get a glimpse of something that it is by doing these thought experiments. And so we are trying to approach it conceptually. But my kind of answer to your question is that yes, you can think of it as that as kind of a fundamental consciousness. And then because it has all potentiality within it, it can project itself at different speeds for a particular purpose and for a particular kind of creation. Because as light goes to different speeds, it will create a particular kind of reality at that speed. And so, in this workshop, we're exploring some aspects of light as it slows down. And here we see two cases, one concrete that we know of in our physical world, and one where we're trying to conceptually get a grasp that if light would travel infinitely fast, what would that reality look like?
So you would say like light has in a kind of essence made a decision to be at the speed that it is because it creates the most matter or something, or why? What would the decision be based on?
So I think that there's something about expressing itself, expressing its potentiality or its infinite capability in material form. So all that information that exists when light travels infinitely fast, you may say that there's kind of like, I don't want to call it a curiosity, but there's some kind of there's something that wants to precipitate or express what it is in material form. And so there's because of that materialization takes place when, as we know it, when light travels at 186,000 miles per second. But there's other kinds of materialization that may occur, were light to travel at different constant speeds. And that's something that I explore more deeply in the whole Cosmology of Light book series. What kinds of quote unquote materialization that's not physical materialization can occur when light travels at another faster speed than c. So that's something that I believe happens when light projects itself at different speeds. So by contrast, if light were to project itself at zero speed, so imagine the exact opposite. It's projecting itself at zero speed, so it can travel nowhere. It has no knowledge. It can't create any harmony. There's nothing that can be created around it. So you have the exact opposite of presence, power, knowledge, harmony. You've got darkness, decay, ignorance, and complete smallness. So that may be described as a hell or whatever you want to call it. But there's the exact opposite of the infinite potentiality when light expresses itself at zero speed. So there's different speeds that it can project itself, and it would create a different reality. And when you consider all those together, it becomes a cosmology. So cosmology is built around this aspect of light creating different realities as it projects itself at different speed. Yes.
Interesting.
I had a couple thoughts and then questions arise. One was when Dylan asked about like light choosing to express itself. I forget what word you used, Dylan, like if it was intention, but also it came back to the question about consciousness and light. And I just was picking up on how, so there was a handful of things. So one was when you were talking about the speed of light traveling and how it's creating past, present and future, and also the symmetries of that. But also there's something that was coming up along how like almost like there's mathematical equations, but also embodiments of reality for that specific traveling. But then there's the reflective field. And I felt like there was a whole nother set of experience. So that which is touched by light, not in the direct path, but in other aspects. So it would be like on far reaches of the universe, or you could think of it even just as beings when other are experiencing another's projection. And it was like an entire reflective field, and how, something to do with knowledge, but the creation of time in reflective experience and how that affects and then comes back in. So something was coming through about that. Mm. And then with Dylan's question about light choosing to express itself, and it kind of related back to the question about consciousness in light, and how as we are light and that consciousness within each seed of light is also in us, and so it's an interactive experience where there's no separation because the consciousness. And so as a unified field, how it's choosing to express itself, the infinite dynamicism of that, like every pulsation from every atom in our body to every particle of light perceived externally, and the unified consciousness choosing to express. And then I think that kind of goes more into power, which I think of as that which most effectively renders reality or moves gravity into being. And then that brings up the idea, like Stephen Hawking talking about the frequency of love, or things that are more powerful. So that was that train.
Thank you. Yeah, that's wonderful.
And I just had one more. Oh, there's two more little thoughts. So one was when you were talking right away, I was thinking about presence, power, and knowledge, and just like the three of the basic principles from the spiritual school that when I first entered, I remember they struck me. But, you know, omnipresence, omnipotence, and omniscience. And those three really came in. And then I brought curiosity to harmony. And you talking about matter expressing in relation to other matter. And I feel like there's a whole nother journey there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the final question was about when you were talking about the zero field of light. And it's so interesting when those two are in relation very near each other. Like I've had experiences, and I even thought recently about that prayer in the Bible where it's like, I'll walk through the valley of the shadow of death and fear no evil. And like when the light of God or whatever we relate to as that, when we are that, how, and I think this time very much because you said it's like hell, but I also see it as fear. Like fear is a frequency that resonates in relation to what you're speaking to. And so when we walk through, sometimes I feel like we're in a field of that. And I just really felt that.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, you know, on the edges, what's happening with the interrelation of, you know, trust and connection and expression and fear. And so those were
Thank you. Those are very, very deep thoughts. And, you know, certainly I think that if I would just quickly say something about fear before moving on, is that your fear arises when there's the experience of complete disconnection. So when we feel least connected to things around us or to any kind of light or source, and when we feel that, you know, we are kind of like a separate reality that's, in a sense, like has to be careful of everything else around us. We can't trust anything around us because we're totally disconnected. That's the basis of fear arising. You know, so it's kind of like in this paradigm of cosmology of light, you know, where light is occurring at a much slower speed, there's the apparent disconnection that is much stronger. You know, so anyway. But let me move forward, you know, and then because I want to cover these concepts of space-time, energy, and gravity, and we still have a quick review to do. Before I move forward, anybody just very briefly want to take a crack at what the quantum is in this cosmology of light framework?
I don't know. I mean, not in this framework per se, but association of quantum and light is what I have in my mind is basically when you have the quantum shift happening, typically energy is emitted. If I can take that energy as light,
okay,
then so that's the relation that I can intellectually think of.
All right, good. Thank you. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
I mean, I always think about it as like when a wave or a flow of something kind of becomes like a single thing. Sometimes I like imagine a like a faucet. If you just barely turn it on and just like one drop of water comes out, because if you like turn it all on, it all comes out as sort of like a flow. But if you just barely turn it on, just it drips into like, you know, a single drop, which you could like name, or, you know, you could measure or something differently than the way you would measure the whole flow of water. So I just think of it as a little bit of like sometimes a slowdown or like a separation or like a pinching off of something like that.
Cool. Great. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. And so essentially in this cosmology of light, you know, if we consider that they're simultaneously light traveling at different speeds, and we have the initial, you know, light traveling infinitely fast, and then we have light that travels at 186,000 miles per second, then quanta it's a bridge mechanism. So it's something that collects and materializes information and light. So you've got all this vast potential that exists in this native state, and then as light projects itself slower, quanta is a mechanism by which that infinite potential can show up in this layer of light where materialization occurs. So, you know, we have this action of quanta that then begins to create this vast diversity that we experience as the different layers of matter and then life arising from that matter. So that's, how we would perceive the notion of quanta in this framework. And essentially, if we just think about what that implies, then what it implies is that light is at the basis of everything, because we have this reality of infinite light, traveling infinitely fast, and all this information, and then we have the materialization through quanta in this layer of experience. And for example, this is a depiction of an atom where you have a number of quantum particles that correlate to create this fundamental unit of matter that we recognize as an atom. But going further, and just summarizing where we finished off in our last workshop before we moved to space-time, energy, gravity, is this notion that you've got these four fundamental aspects of light, which we are terming presence, power, knowledge, and harmony. And then, if you recall, we said that these four aspects not only organize what these different layers of matter are, but they materialize as the very components at that layer of matter. So for example, here, this is a depiction of the standard model where it's color-coded into quarks, which are purple, the leptons, which are green, bosons, which are red, and the Higgs boson, which is yellow. And so here, pretty simply, you have, light's aspect of knowledge materializing as quarks, light's aspect of power materializing as leptons, light's aspect of harmony materializing as bosons, and light's aspect of presence materializing as the Higgs boson. When you go up a level of complexity, then we find that same fourfold classification occurring in the periodic table. So you have light's aspect of power showing up as S-shell elements or atoms. You have light's aspect of presence showing up as D-shell atoms. You have light's aspect of knowledge showing up as P-shell atoms. And then you have light's aspect of harmony showing up as F-shell atoms. And then when you extrapolate to the next level or move up a level of complexity, then at any living cell, whether animal cell, plant cell, or human cell, again, this is defined scientifically by just 4 molecular plans. And you find that light's aspect of knowledge materializing as nucleic acids, light's aspect of power materializing as polysaccharides, light's aspect of harmony materializing as lipids, and light's aspect of presence materializing as protons, as photons, as the proteins in cells. And so basically what we have here is this fourfold classification organizing and materializing. So essentially light materializing itself at more and more complex levels of existence. And here what we went through, the standard model is the basis of all physical systems. The periodic table is the basis of all chemical systems. The molecular plans and cell is the basis of all biological systems. And so essentially we're saying that all physical, chemical, biological systems that are all express stability and existence have nothing but light as their basis. And it's the play of all 4 aspects that occur simultaneously that create the foundation for stability and allow the next level of emergence to take place. Now, through extrapolation, since cells are the basis of all tissue, and tissue is the basis of all organs, and organs are the basis of all systems in the body, whether digestive, endocrine, nervous system, cardiovascular, whatever. So therefore, human beings are an extrapolation and a materialization of light, and therefore also all collectivities, small or massive, are nothing but an organization and materialization of light. So just summarizing what we went through in the last workshop was that when we ask the question, what's made up of light, then essentially everything is made up of light.
And like, do you think, because you kind of think that there's some consciousness in light, and then there's consciousness more at the cellular level, but would you argue that there is some at the chemical and like fundamental level too?
So the way that I would describe it is that there's a few different things going on. One is that we can see, first of all, let me talk about love and then I'll come to consciousness. So we can see the very fundamental action of love occurring at this quantum particle level itself, because the very fact that you have all four of the aspects that are implicit in light, presence, power, knowledge, harmony, they exist as one inside light. When they express themselves externally, then they still want to maintain their connection with each other. And that unity where all four of them have to act together to create the foundation at the physical, chemical, or biological basis is nothing other than love. So what we're seeing is like an implicit action of love that is like a secret inside light. And then I'll say that consciousness, we recognize in the human experience, consciousness becomes something different. And there's like an opening where we can feel much vaster ranges of consciousness, but not necessarily. Sometimes it takes a shaking up of, who we are for us to connect with something that's that we call consciousness. But the point being that consciousnness requires more to express itself, requires more and more complex forms to come into being, but it always exists, whether it's smaller or larger. So, whether it's kind of, when it's at the quantum level, you can say that, consciousness only has the instrumentation to express itself in a very distinct and finite way. But when you come to the human level, that means of expression has become much more diverse. So you can.
So maybe we would have even more ways to express ourselves as a society or as a bigger and bigger entity.
Yes, precisely. Yes, and even like anything that may emerge from the human being that's different than the human being, where as a result of work that we do in ourselves, where we break down barriers, where we let go of old habits, we allow more space in our being, then much more of this consciousness can come through and it can become the basis of a different kind of experience. But exactly, yeah. Okay. So, I'm going to just move to space-time, energy, gravity, and then we'll take a quick break. Okay. How are we doing? Do we need to take a quick break right now? We've been going at it for a while. So how's everyone doing? Or should I continue?
I don't mind a break for a couple of minutes.
Sure. Let's take a break for like 3-4 minutes. Yeah. Okay.
You're right back.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to take us through this space-time, energy, and gravity, but we'll take less than 30 minutes for it. Okay, because we've discussed a lot, and this will be, hopefully, will follow easier, but let's see. But one thing that I would ask, since we're going to enter into a slightly different mode now, is to become totally present and let go of anything else that you have going on, and just kind of enter into this next 15 minutes so that we can get as much as possible from this exploration of space-time, energy, and gravity. All right, okay. So the basis to think about space-time, energy, gravity is, again, this is from cosmology of light framework or point of view, again, is to think about light traveling infinitely fast. And when it travels infinitely fast, there's a particular kind of reality and vast infinite information and potential that exists. When it projects itself at a slower speed, then there's the possibility for this infinite materialization to occur. And the mechanism by which that materialization occurs is, as we've been saying, is quanta, is this bridge mechanism. And what I want to propose is that there's a process by which this infinite information shows up as something that we recognize as quantum particles, but they're the thing that precedes quantum particles. There's kind of like the seeds or whatever that is what's going to show up as a quantum particle. And so this arrangement of all these different seeds that are going to materialize or show themselves as quantum particles is nothing other than space. So space is this information that's going to show up as seeds that are the basis of all quantum particles. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, all right. So now, when you have this seed, there's a process of materialization that's going to occur, but it's going to take a journey for the materialization to happen. And so that is how we experience time. That's the basis of time. These things in our field where light travels at 186,000 miles per second, we know that space and time are not absolute, they're relative. And here we're getting a glimpse into just how relative they might be, because we're saying that any potentiality that exists within light traveling infinitely fast and that materializes in this field, it has its own kind of like time component in a sense, or its own field of space, if you will. Yeah. Now further, the actual process by which the seed becomes matter is what gives us insight into this notion of energy. Okay. So there's a precise kind of process by which this seed materializes itself, and that is what defines what energy is. And then further, we find that there's always a relationship between different seeds that occur together in different configurations in space, and that's the basis of gravity. So it's a particular kind of relationship that exists between different kinds of seeds. So in a cosmology of light, very fundamentally, what we're saying is that space, time, energy, and gravity are all due to this kind of fundamental quantum action where there's some kind of infinite information that's seeking to materialize in this field where light travels at 186,000 miles per second. And that process of materialization requires the intimate action of these things that we recognize as space, time, energy, and gravity. So all four of these have to occur for the materialization to take place. Further, if we think about what space is, so space-time, energy, gravity, I want to propose, is nothing other than a different way to look at knowledge, power, presence, and harmony, which are four implicit properties of light. The four light properties that we're saying they show up in different ways depending on how we look at them. But space, since it has this vast potentiality of everything that will occur, it's a summary of knowledge. Time, since no matter what obstacles come in the way, the seed is going to show up in the way that it was supposed to. It's essentially it's giving us a glimpse into this aspect of power. So power is at the basis of time. When we think about energy, then this thing that's a seed is going to materialize in material form, and therefore it's nothing else than this thing that we call presence that exists in this vast field. And then gravity is a relationship between different seeds that coexist, and that is nothing other than harmony. So we see these four aspects of light, these deep aspects, showing up as nothing other than space, time, energy, and gravity. And the action of all four of these is required for anything to materialize from the infinite field into the finite field of matter. So space-time, energy, gravity, in this point of view, are a composite unit. They have to occur together. There's no separation between their action. So space-time, energy, gravity happen at the same time always. They're simultaneous. Now, I'm going to go further. For deep change to happen, I want to propose that this composite unit-based action needs to be activated. Every time that we want change to happen in our lives or with anything, and we want that change to sustain itself, we have to invoke all four aspects: space, time, energy, gravity. That's required for change to stick or for change to persist. All four of these aspects have to be activated. And the only way, or rather one kind of like sure way to activate them, is to try and remember this relationship where we exist apparently in a certain sphere of light, where light's traveling at 186,000 miles per second. But this occurs within a larger sphere of light. And so there's infinite potential based, I'll call them libraries. And somehow this, when we think about light, or when we activate light, because the nature of light is one and we all have access to it because it's deeply embedded in us, if you want change to happen, if we think about light, if we visualize light, then that change will be more enduring, more permanent, more full. So I'm proposing this to you. I'm not saying, I'm proposing that this is what happens for sustainable change to happen, is that in fact light has to be invoked, because it's only with the invocation of light that all four of these aspects can begin to occur or act. So this is just a proposal. And essentially what I'm proposing is that change has to be quote unquote written, because we're talking about information from this infinite field that's materializing in this finite field. But the process by which any kind of information materializes, even if we want a change to happen, it's still information that needs to materialize, is that it has to be written by the space-time energy gravity composite. Okay, so no matter what change you want to happen, if that change is going to endure, then it has to be written using space-time energy and gravity. Then it becomes something that can endure. Let me go through one more slide and then I'll pause. So a way to think about this process of emergence is that there's a micro space-time energy gravity container, and within that there's specific potentiality that's written into this container, and that shows up as quantum particles. When we think about the next level of granularity, again, there's a micro space-time energy gravity container that shows up as the elements in a periodic table. When you go up the next level of complexity, again, there's a micro space-time energy gravity container, and that's how the molecular plans inside cells can materialize, and so on up the chain. But everything requires this action of space-time energy and gravity to materialize. And then the combined materialization of all these different things that we experience in our field at this material level is nothing else but a macro space-time energy gravity container. So when we say that we live in a world governed by space-time energy and gravity, then what we're saying is that the microaction of space-time energy and gravity has created all these minute laws. They've written it into a fabric, and the aggregate view of that is this experience of space-time energy gravity at the macro level. So the process of emergence and any subsequent change requires this action, this composite action of space-time energy gravity to take place for both emergence and change to happen. Okay, let me just pause there. So, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting new layer. I haven't heard you talk about that kind of a thing before. Just those space-time energy gravity containers. But yeah, it kind of makes sense because it's like that each level of emergence is very clear, kind of comes with like new properties. So yeah, I see why you do that.
Yeah, because fundamentally, if we just kind of summarize, space is these particular kinds of seeds that or ideas from the field of infinity that need to express themselves in a particular way, but it requires the action of these seeds have a certain maturity, which is time. They have a certain process of materialization, which is energy, and they have a certain relationship with other seeds, which is gravity. And so space-time energy, gravity need to all occur at the same time for that thing to materialize, no matter what the level of complexity. So for any emergence to be recorded, then there has to be a space-time energy gravity container, which actually becomes the ink on the paper, if you will. That's how things are recorded at the micro or macro level. So.
Yeah, okay.
I'm going to try and put this in words, but one of the things I was just tuning into, I was thinking about like alchemy, or spagyrics are a specific alchemical process of making tinctures, and it's all based on working with the elements, and things are taken apart and put back together in a very specific way. And as I look at the spectrum of what you're showing, and like the human body's kind of a little bit further, but I was seeing this intermediary, right, where we are the infinite potentiality and we are matter. And if we think of it in a fractal nature, and how you said like a place for the ink on the paper to elicit change, I was having spagyrics and alchemy come in, and how, so essentially it's like whether you think of it in a petri dish or it's done in a lab, but you're essentially reconfiguring space-time energy and gravity, utilizing, and you can think of it as these elements or even the planetary energies as seeds within themselves, right? In our universe, they're like seeds working together, creating gravity.
Yeah.
But how on the fractal level, like my interest might be that I want to feel healthier in my body, but when I'm conscious to what that really means, and I go to a tincture or something that's recalibrating the space-time energy field of a element, and I put that into my body, and what that does for me in relation to the fractal whole, and I was just getting layers of understanding, and how interesting it is, because there's so many aspects of fractal embodiment, right? Like from our organ systems to, but I was just really feeling that ripple, like when you're talking about a container for change to happen, and just how many layers there are, like with a plant in the lab, in the human body, in the unit of the system, in the universe, and how our solar system is affecting. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's very nicely put. Yes, absolutely. There's this unified complexity that just kind of light, essentially, that in which everything is anchored. So that's one way I would put it. Yeah.
And the fractal chaos, right? Because it's like in my desire to make change, I'm exploring, and sometimes I put something in that creates more.
Yeah.
You can't really say disharmony, because in your view, there is no, everything rebalances in a greater scale, but it's like I'm creating more chaos in the seeking for my
Mhm.
desire for more unification.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. Thank you. So, with that, I'm going to just move to. Do we need a 2-minute break? I want to move to the some of the applications so we get a taste for how to integrate space-time, energy, gravity into visualizations from this point of view. Yeah, so, are we good to move forward?
I'm okay.
Okay. All right. Karan, are you okay? Yeah. All right.
Yes, Praveen, I'm okay.
Fine. Okay. Let's move forward. Yeah. Okay. So to give you a taste for some, now these are all the same kind of visualizations, but with the layer of, in some cases, the layer of space-time, energy, gravity. And we're going to do it in the same format where we've done it previously, where I'm going to share a quick visualization, and we're going to practice it, and then we'll just report out how it was for us. So I start with the fundamental. Please imagine light. Take a second. So in your mind's eye, imagine light. So what do you experience when you imagine light? Let's take half a minute. Okay. All right. We'd like to share when they imagine light, what happens.
Can go.
Yeah.
Like my like I first kind of thought of like a golf ball or something white, but then I was thinking like about the speed that it travels at, and that like the speed is so fast that it is the speed of light. That so it just felt like a really big thing, like something bigger than I can even use like the description of like like miles or something for, because it would just be everywhere. So I felt like there's an everywhereness to it. It was so big.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I kind of imagine it as white, but I know it's like a color is not really a great thing, but for whatever reason, that's all I can do. I was trying to think about a better way to think about the color of light, but that's just a property that's in my head, not that's in light itself. So yeah, I was just thinking of something very, very big, sort of everywhere, acts differently depending on how I look at it from my point of view, but it is itself something stable.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dylan.
Yeah, there is, apart from the stillness thing they mentioned earlier, there is also a certain comfort. And since when you see light, there is something very primal about darkness being scary, right? So just the opposite that happens with light.
Mm-hmm.
So there is something which suddenly kind of there's a warm feeling in some ways. And that warm feeling does other things as well, in the sense that you kind of, if you're, for instance, thinking about somebody, then with light, then obviously that has its impact and stuff like that. But yeah, I think, so that part and the stillness, I mean, I guess that's something like that, along with along with some currents in the body and so on.
Yeah. Thank you, Kanan. Anastasia?
I was just taking in your share when you said that warm feeling. It was like I felt like the sense of home, like the emergent place where we all come from, but it really felt good. When I closed my eyes and imagined light, immediately I felt everything as made of light, and I felt myself in relation or relative connectedness to everything. So I felt like the couch vibrating at a slower, more condensed rate. Than there was sound coming from the highway that's far away, but in that space, it's like even beyond my mind, because I don't think about this outside the experience, how even the sound is light and it travels way faster than, for example, the way that the couch is vibrating, even though I'm connected to everything. There's no separateness, but it's like, it's as if, yeah, the seeds or the photons, everything's lighting up at a certain, or expressed, and so even the sound, I could feel where it's activating, but it's all happening simultaneously, and just felt myself in that infinite field of everything.
That's cool. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. So when I experience, or when I imagine light, then it really calms me down. It like I feel more like that I'm moving in a different time kind of container. So it's everything becomes more present. So it's nice. So okay, I'm gonna move us to the next one, and
Oh, yeah. That's what I
yeah,
was imagining. That
that's
little.
what you're doing. Yeah. So just take a minute to visualize in your mind's eye. So using your mind's eye here, not your physical eyes, but your mind's eye, and just see this ball of light, and then begin to play with this ball of light in whichever way you want. Let's take half a minute for that, please. Okay. Would like to share? Anybody like to share about that?
Yeah, I can go.
Yeah.
Like yeah, like first I like zoomed into it and I imagined it was a kind of like a marshmallow, and then I spun it around in my mind's eye and I started thinking about if like a mile would be the same if I was tiny, or if like maybe the speed of light was sort of different, which didn't really make sense, but it just was something I thought about, is like, what if the time was different or there were more dimensions inside of it? Then I zoomed back out and I thought about like a bunch of them, like 8, 10, 6, like 16, 24, kind of like doubling until they made like some kind of a creature. And I was like, what if each one of those things was light, and we have light inside of all of our cells? So maybe that's kind of like a metaphor for who we are or something. So that was just my little thought stream.
Thank you. Thanks, Glenn.
You kind of visualize getting into it, and then there is nothing else. And that's all there is.
Okay. Yeah, that's very deep. Thank you. Yeah. Anastasia, any thoughts?
When I saw the ball of light from the outside, it was so reflective. It was just white, and I just watched it, and it had some light coming off, or almost like electricity coming off. And yeah, I couldn't see anything from the outside, but when I went inside, I was carried like to a forest in Russia, and maybe like I saw some sailboats on the ocean. It felt like the Mediterranean, and then I was in the Andes, and from inside, yeah, I could go anywhere and just see and feel like family and people. And then when I came back out, I just thought, well, what if it just expanded? And then I felt all of us connect, like feeling each other, the layer at which we do all see and feel each other all the time.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, when I did this today, it was, it would pulse between being small and large, but what happened was that as a result of it becoming very large and then becoming very small, I suddenly felt myself kind of dispersed everywhere and then coming back. So it was a very unusual, it was a very, I don't know, surreal experience, but just spread everywhere and then back, and then everything being of this substance. Yeah, so it was nice. Okay, now a slight modification of that. So you imagine the sphere of light, and there's this light that you may visualize it whatever way you want, but this light is creative, this sphere, and it's going to begin to make some change in some field of your life or some field somewhere. And so there's kind of a projection of some information from this creative sphere of light that creates some seeds that define the space bubble. Then you can rapidly get a sense for how these seeds might mature within your chosen area. And then you also imagine this energy sphere where you see how these seeds will materialize, and then a gravity sphere where you see the new relationship in that field that you're looking at. So just take a minute or two and focus your sphere, this creative sphere, somewhere, and then focus the action of the space-time energy and gravity spheres that are going to make some change, and just visualize what this whole process in your mind's eye. Just take a minute or two. Okay. You're ready, just open your eyes. Would like to share what happened?
I'll share.
Sure. Thank you.
So I didn't really use my mind when I created the sphere. Someone came in that I noticed lately, like, just there's energetics that maybe like karmic things or things repatterning. That's from my mind from before the process. And I saw both of us. And at first I was at a very specific angle. And by being in the field of light, it immediately recalibrated the energetic flow. So maybe in the other material plane of past, there was a pull or something in different ways. I saw this complete infinity. So at first I just saw the infinity flowing perfectly between the two, one of them being me. And then I noticed I was at a very specific angle above watching this. And then as I noticed, it took me like behind each of our hearts so that I could see the flow. And then from there, it took it in the other direction and was essentially showing me like parts of the toroidal sphere, but in infinity waves.
Mm.
And then I was just carried from all directions to see this perfect harmonious flow, like no breaks in the flow. And then eventually it took us into where I saw both the toroidal spheres in complete flowing harmony, but and just separated. It's almost like a light sphere cord cutting, but a very different, until both beings are in complete sovereign alignment and both the fields in complete flow and light.
Awesome. Thank you. Very, very complete. Thank you.
And difficult to put it in words, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, mine's just like a recognition of the fractal nature. Just was thinking, like, from this angle, kind of like how many things might be behind other things, and like why things look the same, and like from different angles, they all sort of have symmetry. So I just thought a lot about the different kind of ways that you might imagine something multiplying or growing.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, what I experienced when I did this was that the impulse that came to me in this kind of sphere of creativity was essentially of bringing a little more of, I want to call it just beauty or fullness into life. And somehow I focused on like yellow flowers, and the seeds were, when I visualized the seed, the space, the sphere of space, then the yellowness became more yellow and was more delightful and was, in a sense, like tastier. It was just more full. And then when I imagined the time thing, it just was becoming more and more full and more compelling as I looked at the yellow. All the yellow petals around the world were just drawing me in more and more. And then when I thought about the energy aspect, I just saw more of infinity getting materialized in that yellowness. And then the gravity, it felt like all the yellow petals all over the world were just connected. So it was a really, I don't know, it was just a strange thing, but it felt very delightful, and I felt very peaceful and calm, and I just felt much more connected to a much vaster thing, which was nice.
I like that.
I felt to share, I have like a garden that I've made on the south facing. I've actually terraced the mountainside, not because I had an idea, but because the land told me to. So I literally am on the very top of the valley, and I like built up a mountainside enough with my own hands. I've like uncovered centipedes and scorpions, and even I've worked sometimes while we were on the last calls, I was like out there in the garden.
Yeah.
But everything that's blooming, the flowers are yellow.
Yeah.
And I want to take you guys out there because the vibrancy of these flowers, I go out every day just to be with the flowers, and the squashes are all blossoming, but I think this will bring some inquiry. Is one of the things I do, because there's no wildflowers up here. I'm just bringing some bees into my yard with this, but I look inside to see if they're male or female, and I get mostly male flowers, which they won't produce the squash. And I'm curious sometimes about what it means, like, and also like reproduction and so, well, I have one purple chive blossom, but I just want to see, I haven't come out today, but every day there's new blossoms. And so, can you see the yellow?
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
This one, it's like the essence of what you were talking about. Like I can feel the difference. This one has so much life force.
Wow.
The color.
Oh my God, yeah.
And that, like, it's different, the feeling, than even these ones over here. But every day I come out and I really feel it in this. This is new today, you know?
Look at how yellow it is.
Wow. Oh, that's awesome. That's amazing. Yeah. That's so beautiful.
And everything, I have dandelion in bloom. Everything is yellow, even the little,
Yeah.
and I often, this is kind of personal, but I kiss the dandelion flowers. I give them kisses.
Wow.
Because they're like, and there's a bee right now as I talk about it.
Yeah.
And
oh, that's so cool. Yeah.
almost looks female, but there's a squash, but maybe there's something about, yeah, like all these male flowers and being with you guys, just like asking for the blessing of the garden. But I just felt to show you that yellow flower.
Oh, thank you so much, Anastasia.
Yeah, no, thank you. That was really special. Because I get so much appreciation and delight. And then my yellow mustard flowers, they're all yellow.
Oh, yeah, that's amazing. Okay. So maybe I tapped into the energy over there. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's move forward. Get a little more, just a couple of more experiences here, and then we can just wrap it up. So, yeah. So if you just visualize, light traveling, infinitely fast. So visualize that vast sphere. Just go into there. Now you're visualizing light traveling slower within that sphere. And there's this space-time energy gravity macro container. And so in your visualization, what you're going to do is you're essentially seeing something from infinity beginning to materialize here in this finite realm through the action of this space-time energy gravity macro container. So just take a minute to do that. Yeah, whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes. Okay. Would anybody like to share how that was?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see it as much as a container, as like a boundary. It was like when, I was imagining how, like, if you go to the asteroid belt around, I think like Jupiter or something, it's like around that distance from Earth. But it looks so crowded, but when you really get in there, it's actually pretty empty. It just doesn't feel as thick as you would imagine. So I kind of imagine like a boundary sort of like that. Like if you were to keep zooming into that boundary, it would just get more of like a blending between the blue and the yellow, not like a definite thing. And then I was just imagining that other graphic you had where you you would put those circles around each of the different like layers, those sort of fractal layers of how we build up to more and more complex creatures. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Dylan.
So some kind of a progression from the subtler to the grosser in some ways. From space, I couldn't get time somehow in it, but then from to energy, and then eventually to gravity, which is which is what you can touch and feel basically in some ways.
Good. Thank you, Kanan.
I think I'm crazy. It's okay. Yeah, when I was in the sphere, it was almost like in a movie where someone's there and it's just white all around, like almost like The Void, but white. And I was just sitting there meditating, kind of like someone might think levitating, but it's kind of even like how sitting here we see form, but there's infinite space. And then one of the flowers from the garden came out and opened and went over me and down to the bottom and took me, and I disappeared. But it was like a wormhole, just how because I think you said something materializes from the infinite, and that's what came. And I just watched it, and I was watching this thing from outside, and yet also could feel, I didn't have any fear or anything, but it, sort of devoured me. But I went into the stem, the green stem sort of, and it was like, like a time. And when it brought me back out, it put me back down in the same spot. And at first I was trying to look, I couldn't tell if I was very old, but then it's like the form was still recalibrating, and just the awareness that in any moment we are participating with the materialization. And it was like, then my hair was long and I stood up, I was very strong and healthy. And it was that ability to, if we fully go into all of it, then how you said, like, to create change. And it was just like how anything really can materialize from this infinite space if we're not limited by what the mind perceives as possible.
Yeah.
And how, like, our highest potential is here in the time of now, if we choose to align with that timeline.
That's very powerful. Thank you. Yeah, for me it was just like a more macro kind of visualization, where perhaps something similar to Kanan's, but it was where something that was conscious and subtle was materializing in this more material kind of like grosser plane, if you will. So, but it felt very nice. There was something that was shifting. So, yeah. And, I want us to do one more visualization, and then I'm going to wrap it up because we're at 10:02. I'm going to skip this, but I want to walk you through this guided situation. So we'll take 5 minutes, and then we'll wrap up. But yeah, basically, I'd like you to think about something that's affecting you in some way. So whether it's a problem you're working on, or interaction with a person or project or whatever it is, but just in your mind's eye, just see that situation pretty clearly. Now, just take a minute and go inside yourself. So to the area behind your heart and see the sphere of light inside your heart. Enter into that sphere and really feel the nature of light, how it's moving, how it feels, how it looks. Enter into it. And now from inside that sphere, just push the boundaries of the sphere so it becomes larger and larger. So you're now sitting inside this personal sphere of light that you've created. It's filled with light. Now invite that situation that was affecting you inside. And allow your light to just penetrate that situation. As you do this, begin to see the true seeds that are there behind that situation. You can visualize a sphere of seeds. Now, if it's affecting you, they may not have been the maturity to what it truly represents, but visualize this time sphere where that situation reaches its harmonious maturation. And see how the energy changes as that thing that's affecting you reaches its fullness in its most positive way. And then see how the relationship between everything changes. So this is all occurring in your own personal sphere. The whole thing is nothing but an action of light. And what you're seeing is the precise action of space-time, energy, and gravity that was meant to be in that situation. Okay. Whenever you want, just open your eyes. Anybody? Yeah, whoever would like to share, please go ahead.
I think this is again relating to a relationship. So without getting into details, when initially, as because you're kind of centered on the heart, there is some heaviness which is there, and as you try to kind of visualize light flowing in and things getting resolved, there is obviously a change in color, and there is more light, and there is more brightness, and it kind of obviously feels nice. And yeah, I mean, you almost kind of know what you need to do, basically. So, to so problems, there is always a seed which is there within you, which has led to a problem, and you almost know what to do. And a lot of times one knows it, but then one doesn't act on it. Somehow you kind of, the resistance to action is kind of, I think, the light is kind of taking care of some of the resistance to action, as kind of melting the resistance to action.
Yeah, I found it very interesting to sort of move from my head down into my heart, because then it's like I don't know, I'm always right here, but it feels like that was nice to think from the heart and then go behind the heart. And yeah, just to feel just like you said, kind of a warmth, a lightness. I think whenever I feel bad, I feel heavy. I don't know why, but then whenever I feel playful, I feel light. Light on my feet, very lightweight. And then it's interesting that would be the same way as you can think about light as just massless. That's the way to be ultimately playful with the universe. How to be totally kind of connected is to be light. When you want to say something to someone and you're dwelling on it, it doesn't work. But when you're listening and when you're flexible, you're being light. I feel like you're being more kind of like that. But yeah. So yeah, it just got me thinking about really that good feeling, of going behind my heart and lifting up and expanding out and brightening up.
Thank you. Thank you, Glenn.
Coming out of the experience, when I was coming back in from that infinite space, I'm left with this inquiry around, it's almost like being human, or our karma. It's like unwinding bound light into fully expressed light was the experience. And I could feel the places that, which is very different than maybe a way of thinking of things that are dark or something. It was just bound light that wants to be freed back fully. And an inquiry around how to create space for those places to be, it's as if there's so much light, but it's condensed down and kind of trapped in a little sphere, these little spheres. And just what can happen, it was an ultimate freedom in the full expression.
Thank you.
And curious how to support that opening for the light to express fully. And it was I was the whole universe.
Nice.
One thing that uniformly happens every time I contemplate light, and including this time, is the breath pretty much drops to near zero.
Can you say that again?
I'm just saying the breath rate pretty much drops to near zero. Breathing rate, the rate of breathing.
You're breathing.
Yeah, I found that too. It just really calms me down and makes me more peaceful and more present, regardless, every time. Yeah,
every time.
Yeah. And so in this experience, I was just looking at a particular situation that I have right now and seeing all the people involved and just the action of light. And I was trying to differentiate between space-time, energy, gravity, and just I was trying to get a glimpse into what really is the root of what's trying to express itself. So But yeah, it was a very calm. I don't know the outcome, nothing. Like you don't even. But it was a very calming experience. So. So with that, we are just past 12, and I want to respect your time. So, I'll just very quickly summarize what we've been through, and then if you have any parting thoughts, and we can wrap it up. But essentially, fluency, what we've been going through is light dynamics. It's like a muscle that needs to be built. Okay. And the more we learn to perceive light differently, the more will the secrets inside light make themselves available to us. And space, time, energy, gravity are essential to materializing what is in light. So that's something that the more we understand it, the more we can see the process of materialization. And then creating your own light sphere will help facilitate any kind of change. And to connect more deeply with light, envision the action of space-time, energy, gravity. So space-time, energy, gravity take us much more deeply into how light can change things. So the more we envision that action, the deeper we can go into light. And then also, no matter what the situation or condition, it can be invited into your light sphere and be re-seen in light. And light has its own logic and will change anything, the information field of anything that's in your light sphere. And that you can experiment with that and see how that actually happens. And then again, just, your power to positively influence change is only, I want to propose it's only limited by your relationship with your light sphere. So that's kind of the summary of everything we've been through. And with that, if there's anything you would like to share before we wrap up, please go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to compare to your your first one. I did really like all the visual. I mean, I'm always a big fan of the ability to let somebody think, and you did a great job letting us dream and think and share. So I like those elements of your phase too.
Thank you. Thanks, Gagan.
And one more thing is I did feel like I understood a lot more about how you're kind of envisioning the slowing of the speed of light, creating emergence more so than I think I did before. So
cool. Great, thank you.
And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of what you shared here, Praveer, is a big leap for me. Obviously, my intuition is not developed to the extent that you obviously have been able to intuitively perceive these things before you probably put a mathematical framework to it, right? Having said that, yeah, I think that's the journey. Right? So, as you said, I think the calming effect of light, the fact that I tend to speak much faster than what I'm speaking right now. So light does that, right? So you tend to slow down, you tend to breathe slower, you tend to words per minute comes down. But then I guess that is the surface, right? And there are those deeper aspects, I guess, which I think probably I feel it very, very unconsciously at this point of time, which if brought to consciousness could be much more transformative. But I already started experimenting with an idea that I took from your blog, for instance, right? About relationships. And what we did in this 5 minute was kind of a continuation of that, but it kind of it has a thawing effect in some ways. I don't know which aspect of light it is, but then if there is something frozen in the mind or heart, it kind of has this effect of thawing it.
Yeah.
So it's a great session. Thanks a lot, Praveer, for putting this together, and really loved being part of it, and also sharing experiences and listening to folks on the call. It's been very good.
Thank you, Karan. I'm glad you could join all the way from Bangalore. So
It's past midnight on a Friday, but I told my wife. She needs to
What
sleep.
better thing do you have to do on a Friday night, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm wide awake now. I need to go back to. I need to make an effort to go back to sleep.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining. Yeah.
I feel grateful. Yeah, really grateful.
Thank you all for taking the time. It's very nice to see you all. And I feel like we're all in different places, so it feels much more vast and global this time. But have a wonderful weekend and hope to connect soon. So take care.
Thank you.
Okay, goodbye.
Everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Stay safe, folks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.